All right, so as we go through today's lesson, hope we'll be looking for behavioral changes that you can make that will represent your commitment to God to be a better steward of God's earth. In some ways, it's very much like a financial stewardship campaign. No one will tell you what you must commit. That's between you and God. No one will tell you what you must do. And no one will know if you do it. No one other than who you choose to tell. No one will judge you for how much you did or how much you accomplished. Remember that everything you do makes a difference in God's world. There are things on our list today that are big commitments and things that are small. Everyone in this class can find something they can do if they really want to be better stewards of God's earth. Some of the things on our list may be things you're already doing. If so, we hope you will pick at least 2 or 3 other things to do this year in addition. Pick things that fit for you and your lifestyle. Okay, for example, when Ray and I moved from the Chesapeake Bay area, we had already learned to recycle. So doing it here wasn't much of a hardship for us. We have to pay a bit more in Comal County to do it, but for us, recycling was already a habit. So he and I need to pick some things in addition to recycling this year. And recycling may be a bigger hardship for some of you than it is for us at this point. So please don't make your decisions in class today. We want you to pray about it, and we want you to listen for what God would ask you to do. You want to be able to commit to keep your commitments that you make to God. And so Ray and I can identify, if you want us to, some of the changes that would have the most impact. Or you can easily research that online as well. Don't just take our word for it. Okay, so let's start by thinking about easy and simple things to do in your home or your office. You probably already know these, but use weather stripping if doors and windows are leaking. Turn off water when you aren't actually using it, like when you're brushing your teeth or washing dishes by hand. You might install a smart thermostat, which controls your heating and cooling units even when you're out of town. Or just raise the temperature inside your home a few degrees in the summer and lower it the same in the winter. If you can tolerate that and stay healthy, it can save a lot of energy and a lot of cost. If you're ready to install new windows or doors, look for the NFRC, the National Demonstration Rating Council label. It allows you to compare products for energy efficiency. Also, when you buy new appliances, make sure they're Energy Star appliances, which save a very significant amount of energy and cost to you. So older homes can lose up to 35% of heat through their walls. Modern insulation can be sprayed, gloved, or installed by hand. Project Drawdown is a think tank that's analyzed how we get the most bang for our buck in reducing climate change. They say that if even half of existing buildings install thicker insulation, 8.3 gigatons, and for those of you that don't know like me, a gigaton is 1 billion tons. So we could by just that kind of thicker insulation, we could avoid 8.3 gigatons of emissions. That's more than overhauling the efficiency of the entire international shipping industry. So having good insulation makes a huge difference. One amazing thing you can do to combat climate change is just to change your light bulbs. LED lights use 90% less energy than incandescent bulbs and half as much as fluorescents. They convert electrons to photons without giving off heat that drives up utilities. Switching your home to LED lights will reduce your cooling bills. They also last a lot longer than other bulbs and they give off bright light. I love them. According to Project Driving, universal adoption of LED lights could prevent 7.8 gigatons of carbon emissions. If you can't replace all those light bulbs at once, you can decide this year to only buy LED lights and replace the old ones as they burn out. Other pretty easy things to do. Now, this is a slide of other easy things to do. Just go through your house before you leave, turn off all the lights and TVs. Unplug small appliances. They really do sap energy even if they're not in use, but they're plugged in. Close your windows and doors when the air conditioning or heating is on. Keep them closed, even if you're just going out for a few minutes. Draw your shades on bright, hot days to keep cooling in, and open your shades in the winter months to warm the house.
One of the things I'd like to refer to is CPS has a great audit site on it. And they will help you audit your own home efficiency. I never considered energy efficiency to be as valuable as it is until the starter project brought out a tremendous amount of money to save. And we did that for the church, and our church is in the process now raising our energy efficiency. The other thing we can do is, one of the big things you can do is you can install solar rooftop, and you can go solar at home, and CPS will give you a $2,500 rebate for putting your solar panels on your rooftop. And it could go up to additional $500 depending on the situation. We are looking at that for Woodland, and our rebate is about $65,000, $65,000 rebate. So you just take that off the cost because as soon as you get it installed, they will cut you a check. So that's one of the biggest things you can do is put that on. Internal investment is about 10 years in our case here. It wasn't much great investment. But they also have another program that, let's say, you can't afford a rooftop solar panels, and because that's a pretty expensive ordeal. And they call it the solar host program. If your home qualifies for it, CPS will install and maintain solar panels on your roof for free. If you turn in what you get is a 3 cent per kilowatt hour credit generated by these panels. And you say, well, what is that? Well, that comes out about 20 to 30% reduction in your utility bill. And you pay nothing for the panels, you pay nothing to install, and you pay nothing for maintenance. You're in essence, you're selling energy to CPS. Other programs that are not available in San Antonio, but there's community solar. And if you live outside San Antonio, some of the other areas they do that, they are moving in that direction with personality. But what they allow homeowners and renters to sign up for green energy. And what you do is community solar is popular in some areas of the country, but not here. In essence, what you're doing is you're purchasing shares in the solar farm that sells electricity to your local power company. And the more shares that you own, the more credits you receive on the monthly bill. So that's an option for some areas. And especially true in larger cities like New York and some other areas like that. So that is hopefully will be coming, it's just not here yet. There are other areas, like for instance, especially in European cities, like Vienna, for instance, where European neighborhoods share the same cooling system. It's called district heating. And so everybody has the same thermostat, everything is set in the same way, one cooling heating system. And it's all pumped to all these different homes in the district or in the neighborhood. I don't know if that'll go over in the United States, but it's one option. I know I'll have a hard time thinking that direction. But it is an option. Also, they're building more bike infrastructure. We see that here. There are other areas of net zero buildings, in other words, buildings that produce their own energy. They're tightening their city codes to make buildings more efficient, and walk around cities or cities where you can walk anywhere in the city and get everything you need.
You live in a place where you can walk to everything.
Yeah, grocery store, pharmacy, everything is right there. So those are called walk around cities where you want to do transportation. Our kids live in New York City, they did everything. One thing you need that I am very proud of is the leadership of San Antonio has made towards clean energy. And last year we won the Solar Superstars, which simply means that we are fifth in the nation for generating watts of clean energy per person. So that means we got a lot of solar panels here on people's homes in San Antonio. We have an outstanding office sustainability, and you can go online and see what they're doing and subscribe to their newsletter. Because a lot of times they need people to call in and contact their representatives when there's important issues coming up and vote on. And one of the biggest things that San Antonio has done so progressive, they started last year, they sent out requests for proposal for they call it flex power, where they replace all these coal generated plants with clean energy. So they sent out requests for proposals for those, and so energy plants wear down or become too expensive to operate as they are, they are replacing those with solar and renewable energy.
This is the best city in Texas.
Yes, we are. This is the best city in Texas. We're leading the way. We're above Austin. There are only like Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, and Houston. I believe those are the only four cities that are really energy friendly. And I'm so grateful that I live in an area where that's the case. The other thing is, what's interesting is that Texas led the country in new renewable energy projects. But the problem is we still rank 10th in the country for fossil fuel consumption, as nearly 90% of our energy is derived from fossil fuels. So why is there so much interest in building solar, particularly wind farms? That's the big one, wind farm. It's because it's smart business, good business. Back in the 2000s, two big tickets was instrumental in pushing the budget of Governor Rick Perry to subsidize wind driven energy. That's why you see all those wind farms in West Texas. And here's why. In the United States, the wind energy potential of 3 states, North Dakota, Kansas, and Texas, would be sufficient to meet the entire energy needs of this country from coast. Wind farms have small footprints, typically no more than 1% of the land they sit on, so that you can still graze and you can still farm the land, you still have recreation there, all the while generating power. By the way, windmills, contrary to what some people say, windmills do not cause cancer. And they are to be retrofits that are reducing the death birds and that. That's been some major concern.
What is the theory of cancer?
I have
Never heard
no idea. No sense to me. You know, many years ago, they used to say power line cancer, and that's been pretty much the problem for them too. So anyway,
Representative of the oil industry, they made that up.
it's interesting, yes.
I didn't mean to cut you off, I was just going to ask. What is the deal on the birds? You hear about birds, people complaining because.
Well, it's not that big, and it birds and bats, and they were flying into the towers.
Yeah.
But they have set up some form of echolocation thing that reflects in the bird, and they don't come near the windmills. And they're retrofitting some of these windmills, things like that, keep them from getting killed. It's not like you see a bunch of dead birds, right? Go by solar. I've never seen dead birds raised by solar. evidently there were some people that were concerned about that. But they have taken corrections to fix that. It,
And some people think that it's kind of, these windmills are kind of an eyesore. They kind of mar the landscape.
how can you moral landscape when it's good? You know, there's not much out there, right? And things like that, and so the places that they would be are really kind of very proper.
I agree with that, but
I find it fascinating.
well, I think it's just something new to get used to. I think power lines are not pretty either, but we're just used to them being everywhere.
Right.
You know, solar's not your roof, but it's like.
Supposedly at night, 30% of the operation all happen, or most of it happens at night. The tips of the blades are almost supersonic speed when they're really humming. So they're all mostly during the day when you're driving through like Sweetwater, going through the Panhandle towards Amarillo, you're just like, I can't believe all these wind farms, you know, and it's amazing, but they're going so slow, you're thinking to yourself, why can't they put generators on the wheels of my car and just make it kinetic, you know, nonstop power, right? But yeah, supersonic speeds on the tip almost.
Yeah.
And that's how they kill the birds and the bats. They're just, at night, they're really going.
The first lease building that I was part of building, decided not to go with solar because we were on the coast. We went with two solar windmills, all generated in like 200,000. And it's all generated by the 2 million. But they chose to use wind because we were on the coast and because hurricanes were tough on solar. So very effective. That's been weird.
But they're addressing hitting birds and bats. The
Yeah.
windmills, yeah. Wind farms have addressed that.
And it's an interesting thing because it's, you know, you hear a lot of people say, well, what about all that money that government subsidizing renewable energy? Well, here's something that I looked at and found out. IMF said that fossil fuel industry received more than $5.3 trillion in subsidies. In 2015, that's about 6.5 global GDP. And so, in comparison, the U.S. wind industry has received $12.3 billion in direct subsidies since the year 2000. So it's not like we're not subsidizing fossil fuel industry. That was a surprise to me. I did not know that. The ongoing cost reduction is going to make energy relief on the wind energy, according to Goldman Sachs, the least expensive source of electricity. It generates power and uses 98% less water than fossil fuels. Here's another thing that really surprised me. That fossil fuel plants and nuclear plants are to get water and use 62 trillion gallons of water in the range per year. And that water is given to them by the federal government and the United States. So we're spending a lot of money on government on water. We're in water shortage. Seems like we need that more for agriculture. The project drawdown, again, this is the return on investment. These are financial guys that they say, where do we get the best bang for our buck? What's most costly? They invest wind generated energy first, invest alternative energy source with these carbon emissions. If we increase and put 21% onshore windmills, just onshore, increases from like 4 or 5% to 21% by 2050, we can reduce emissions by 84.6 gigatons of carbon. That's a lot. If we increase the offshore by just 4%, we can avoid 14.1 gigatons of carbon emissions. And it's an investment of $1.8 trillion on his wind turbine. But it's a 30-year payback, 7.7. So it's a good investment.
Okay, remember that in our first read, as we went through the Bible, we identified that God's Old Testament commandments included the requirement of sustainable land use. If you weren't here for that, I hope you'll look at the website about all the scriptures in the Old and New Testaments that identify our responsibilities that God gave us to care for. Well, sustainable land use is something we can still do today. There are people in our church who can advise you much better than I can about gardening and landscaping. So there's some other experts around here as well. I don't need to link it to find out. But the big picture suggestions are: one, use native plants. They require less water, and that's just a responsible thing to do. Plant more perennials and fewer annuals. Incorporate wildflowers. These are just simple things you can do around the house. Growing your own family's vegetables. That's much more sustainable and wastes less food. You can only go pick what's out in the garden. Or you could volunteer to clean up public lands and waterways. I know some people in our church have done that as well, and it's been very rewarding for them. Or donate to groups that conserve the ocean, the forests, the wetlands. That's a terrific idea. So, plant more trees. Trees are really our best friends in the fight against climate change. As you know, they take in carbon dioxide, produce oxygen. But we have now destroyed half of the world's trees, from 6 trillion to 3 trillion. So we need 1 trillion more trees because they buy us time in the fight against our climate crisis. Only by restoring these forests will we be able to keep temperatures from rising to very dangerous levels. But how can we plant 1 trillion trees? It sounds impossible, doesn't it? Well, here's just one idea. Plant for the Planet is a world tree planting project. In January of 2007, 9-year-old Felix Fiedmeyer gave a class presentation of his climate crisis project. He ended his report with the words, "Let's plant 1 million trees in every country on Earth." Other children joined in his project, and when the UN heard about it, they joined too. Today, over 91,666 children and youth have already been trained at 1,680 academies in 75 countries, where they teach each other about the climate crisis and the reason to plant trees. Kids are planting the trees, and the kids themselves are planting these trees. And in third world countries, the UN is actually reimbursing them a bit to do so. You can donate and track the progress of this project by country, simple phone, if you're interested. Today, the Plant the Planet has been responsible for 14 billion new trees. The US ranks 12th in the overall competition to plant those trees, to plant the most trees. Now, you can join this as an individual, as a family, as a church group, or a company, and start planting trees. Or you can donate to this group and let somebody else do that for you. Either way, it's good for the environment. But if you're looking for a bigger way to make a difference in this climate crisis, consider researching this project just a bit and make a presentation at the PTA meeting to see if you can get your school to sponsor a program in which classes compete with each other to plant the most trees. That's just one idea of how you can make a difference.
I'll say something about that. It's a really neat phone app on here. China leads with 2 million trees. and we've planted 195. But, you know, it's really neat.
That's key.
And with the kids, what you do is you take a leaf of the tree that you planted, and you take a picture and you post it on the site, and you give the coordinates where it's planted, and help track it. It's really fun. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you recall from our first lesson that God instructs us to treat animals humanely. And as you know, we haven't been doing a really good job of that as a species. We haven't. So if impacting this area of climate change and the problems of climate change is the one of most interest to you, here are a few good things you might want to do. The World Wildlife Fund does a lot more than you might think. Just becoming a member would help. You could adopt an animal on their website, or just buy gifts from WWF online for those family members you never know what to get. We have sometimes. Maybe if you're not going to be happy with your gift anyway, give them something that does something good. Maybe you could set up a social media birthday fundraiser for you or for a child that would encourage others to donate to wildlife causes. WWF has a research series that would be of benefit to any reader. Maybe just commit to learning more from their incredible Living Planet report. They also have an amazing network of opportunities for young people around the world. Explore maybe with your child or your grandchild any interest they might have in participating in an internship or a shorter program someday. Okay. Now we're going to move to the category of food. Giving thanks for food shouldn't be practiced as a habit or an obligation. I think we can renew the meaning of blessings by remembering that God's creation is what provides us with every life we put on earth. Often an animal gave its life as a sacrifice for our meal. If we still lived on farms, we would be much more aware of this. The sacrifice of the animal, as well as the sacrifices of farm laborers, might help to install in us a little more gratitude. The planning meals reduces waste food costs by a significant amount. It's hard for me, but it might also mean more frequent trips to the grocery store. So as you decide how to avoid wasting food, also weighing the carbon cost of additional gas depending on how distant you are from the store. But food waste in the U.S. occurs mostly in stores and at home because it spoils in either place before we eat it. You know that Americans throw away up to 40% of the food they buy. So we can combat food waste by planning, shopping for only what we need, by eating our leftovers, and composting scraps. Project Drawdown estimates that curbing food waste could avoid a whopping 70.5 gigatons of carbon dioxide. That's a bigger impact than restoring 435 million acres of carbon tropical forests. Just think, you know, if we're avoiding that food, maybe it can be spread around the world. The food that we don't need. Okay, so not everyone will want to, or maybe even should become a vegetarian or a vegan. But if you want to consider it, transitioning to a vegetarian diet can take your carbon footprint in half, and going vegan even lower that one thing that's your carbon footprint in half. Even shifting from high to low meat consumption, which is kind of what we're trying to do, can shrink your footprint by a third. And half of the world's population reduced meat consumption, if half of the world's population reduced meat consumption and avoided the associated deforestation caused by agriculture, we could reduce carbon emissions by 66 gigatons. So consider new recipes that use less meat and more vegetables and carbohydrates. One of the criticisms of the Green New Deal claimed that the government wanted us to stop eating burgers and steak. But less meat and more vegetables is not only better for Americans' health, it's also better for our planet. All right, so here are a few other things about food and food preparation. They're good choices for the environment. Rather than a gas stove or oven, an electric or induction oven cuts down on energy use costs. Younger or larger families may not be able to do this one, but now that we're down to just two eating together, using a toaster oven or an air fryer is much quicker and more efficient. It heats up far more quickly than our oven does, and it doesn't heat up the home nearly as much. You already know that avoiding styrofoam, paper plates, and plastic utensils is an important change. Also, refusing the handfuls of condiments handed to you in the drive-through window, all of those will cut back considerably on our landfills, and some of the drive-throughs are already starting to restrict their employees from dumping many of those in the bag. And here's a new one to think. Because palm oil has been found to be a cheap preservative, CO2 trapping trees are being deforested to plant palm trees in mass. Palm trees just don't do the same thing for the environment. Avoiding palm oil might be a choice that you can live with. It requires you to read the labels though, and it's going to be found in a lot of things. But as much as you can, try to do that. Buying local and seasonal food helps not only the small businesses, but it also reduces the fossil fuel emissions associated with transporting these foods across country and cold chain storage involved. Find some good farmers markets, support them. Grow your own garden, I mentioned that before, or participate in your churches or community garden. See, Vicki or Kristen, if you want to do that, or any member of our Oikonomos team. And then, food production is a major driver of wildlife extinction. What we eat contributes around a quarter of global warming gases and emissions, and it's responsible for almost 60% of global biodiversity loss. So farming animals for meat and dairy requires space and huge inputs of water and feed, destroying lots of other habitats. Today, one of the biggest causes of forest loss is the expansion of agricultural land for meat production. Producing meat creates vastly more carbon dioxide from vegetables, grains, and fruits. Moving away from a meat-dominated diet can lower your impact. Okay, so finally on this subject, we're going to materials. You've seen this symbol for a very long time. It's recycle, reduce, reuse, and recycle. We need to stop and realize that everything we buy affects the planet. Buying less will save money, reduce waste, and improve your environmental footprint. Before we buy anything from the standpoint of our budget and from the standpoint of the planet, we can ask ourselves, is this a want or a need? Christians are not materialistic people, right? When you do buy, support eco-friendly products, which are less damaging to the environment. I was amazed to learn that the fashion industry accounts for 8 to 10% of global climate emissions, more than all international flights and maritime shipping combined. And fast fashion, which the industry has created, has created a throwaway culture that sees that clothes end up in landfills. You can make a commitment to buying fewer clothes, wearing them longer, and recycling them responsibly if they no longer fit. Just say no to the fashion police. Of course, dispose of harmful household chemicals in ways that don't harm the land or the waterways, and choose non-toxic materials whenever possible.
One of the things that it really got to is the fact that there's just so much plastic. Water bottles, K-cups, although there are new things about K-cups that Nestle and Keurig both are finding ways to recycle K-cups. Yeah. Cut the top off of it, wash it out, and then put the recyclable plastic. Takes a little effort, but it's a way to be confident that way. But avoid them if you can. Recycle anything that's possible, including bigger things like furniture. And let business know and owners know that you appreciate their attention for recycling and climate concerns. We have a moment, we have that time to talk about some of those corporate things that are being done, especially places like that. Consider buying electronic vehicle, electric vehicle. I know they're expensive. I know that is maybe a drawback also, the amount of mileage you get for charge. But don't just factor in the actual payments that you might consider, that you might make over 4 to 6 years. But also consider the fact that with our kids, they found that they have saved so much money on gasoline and on oil and on maintenance costs that they incurred in their other cars that they no longer incur with electric vehicles. You'll pay it off much faster than college. Look at the big picture. If you don't feel comfortable with an EV, look at hybrid vehicles. Jenny and I have had one for 8 years. We got one of the first ones that came out, and we love the performance, and we love especially the fact that we'll make about half the number of trips to gas stations. Hybrid uses a little motor to recharge the battery, so you never have to worry about plugging in. Great, it's a great product to have. We also carpool. We live in Dallas. We save gas. We're going to excess miles we put on our vehicles. Not everybody can do that. The other thing is, not everybody can have mass transit, but if you have access to it, consider it. One of the biggest issues is education. And when we think about learning as much as we can, there are a lot of resources out there to look at. But I want to focus on one particular phase of education that I'll probably draw down to discover, and that is education of women, especially in third world countries. On average, women make up 43% of the agricultural labor source in those countries and produce 60 to 80% of the food crops in poor countries. According to the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, if all women smallholders, which we call smallholders, because they're only like 5 acres, working on 5 acres, receive the same access to production resources, loans, things like that, their farm yields would yield 20 to 30% more, and the number of undernourished people in the world would drop 12 to 17%. Translated, that means 150 million people would go on. Just if we can educate women. The other thing too is that women with 4 years of education have more options available. They also have fewer and they have healthier children, and they actively manage their own reproductive health. The UN says that if all nations enroll 100% of girls in the elementary and high school, by 2050, there would be 843 million fewer people worldwide than entered enrollment. This thing they are. According to the Brookings Institute, the difference between a woman with no years of schooling and 12 years of schooling is almost 4 to 5 children per woman. And it's precisely in those areas of the world where girls are having the hardest time getting educated. The population growth is the fastest. Or they feel like they have to have so many more children, so they just want that. So, to consider is to consider your investments. Consider pulling your investments out of organizations that produce greenhouse gas emissions. This is called investing, and this was one of the most effective tools used in ending apartheid in South Africa. So far, companies have pulled $9.94 trillion as fossil fuel industry companies, and $58,000 for $5.2 billion. We don't have that kind of money, but we did that, and we asked our investment advisor, and she did it. We invested in those kinds of organizations that are looking at best possible. Spread the word, and use your influence. You can join, if you don't speak up, nobody else will know that you care. You want to talk. If you want to join a bigger movement, join a global movement like County said, which aims to inspire a billion people. They practice steps to change their leaders to act boldly on climate change. Organizers say that 1 billion people take action that can reduce as much as 20% of global emissions just by speaking up. Or you can sign up with the UN's hashtag Act Now Speak Up campaign on climate change and sustainability. Use your voice as a consumer to influence service providers and retail. Most of all, make climate change an important issue when making voting decisions. And finally, join Oikonomos. We have the goal to become the leader in Texas churches, all churches, on combating climate change. That's a lofty goal, and we hope to achieve it. The main thing is pick an environmental issue that you care about. Decide on a specific request for change to the audience that you target, and then plan how you'll make those things happen. If you don't plan, if you don't do it, you won't. Your voice deserves to be heard. So, I'm speaking. Well, I think we open it for questions. If we have time, we'll talk about some of the corporations that are going green, which is very encouraging.
So any choice that you make here represents a certain amount of sacrifice on your part. And some of them are maybe small sacrifices. Some of them would be a big sacrifice. And you are going to make your own decision. We want you to pray about it, see what God wants you to do. But, you know, a bigger influence is better, but everything you do makes a difference. I was thinking just now, I mean, as a church, we could be doing similar things, and I think we would be glad to have other people join us. But beyond that, there are things we could do as a church. I'm realizing as we sit here that maybe 15 years ago, my nephew was in a youth group in Oklahoma, and their youth group was very concerned about the climate, and they wanted to bring that to the attention of the church. And so they said to the church, we think we should quit using styrofoam paper plates. And that was, you know, fairly early in this movement, at least in Oklahoma. And so they took it to like the youth, to the church council, and the answer to the youth was, okay, that's fine, but you all do the dishes. So, you know, I think part of what the reason I'm telling this story is that we all need to be willing to make a sacrifice. We don't need to push it on to the next generation. We don't need to tell them they're responsible for everything. The answer could have come back. How about you wash the dishes and we'll do this part? You know, we'll suggest that we do this part to match you. So that, I guess I'm just saying, for our kids and you all know that.
Any questions or anything about some of the, I mean, there, we'll post a lot of this, we'll also post the podcast, gather together a lot of books and research and information. There is so much out there to do. And the key is we all do something better than that, because we have no time to waste. I will not live to see the drastic effects. Some of you will, most of a lot of us won't.
But we are all seeing some of the bad effects of climate change right now. I mean, I don't know if you noticed it, but that picture of the whale, something with all that dead whale on the beach. I mean, look at that. That's horrifying. So we all do see what's, happening now. It's just going to get so much worse if we don't do something. But I believe God will help us.
On the website, on the most is we will have a lot of corporations, because corporations are listening to services that they're going through. Besides, it's profitable. They figured out it's profitable. Our son is a consultant, essentially, and he goes all over and talks and helps corporations turn going green into profitable. And it's remarkable that thousands of companies.
One of the biggest hindrances for all of us, including corporations, is that it's not the way it's done. I mean, we're just comfortable with what we're used to. We have to think to do something different. We have to make a commitment to do something different. We have to change. And gosh, there's enough change going on right now for all of us without something else. But this is important.
I have a comment. I think, not to take it off of what we can do individually, but where I get frustrated, kind of like we talked last night or last week about, I feel like I can do so much at home, but then when I see the waste on the corporate level or whatever, so my example is, they ask for volunteers at our school lunch sometimes to help with the kids, like opening their stuff. And I can't do it anymore because I see the waste at school. But I think what I understand is that they have to give every child everything, even though the child will never eat it, because they have to provide the balanced meal. They have to provide all the right things. And it's like, yeah, I mean, we have a tiny school, 3 grades per class, and it's like a dumpster full of waste every meal. And that's one tiny school.
It is, and that's where we set up as a PTA or whatever, say, okay, let's take that food and turn it into compost.
It's not just food,
But it's
wrapping.
plastic, it's all in
All
plastic,
plastic.
it's all, I mean, it's all.
I have a fork and a napkin and a straw and this like plastic thing, right? And so many times, I'm just like, I need a straw, when they don't even need a fork. They think they can't drink it from the spout. You got a straw, they'll open the whole thing and throw the napkin and the fork away just for the straw. I don't know,
Could be.
But the challenge with that, because as a social worker at school, I tried to, when I worked with the north side, and it's FDA guidelines, because the cafeteria workers, it's a problem for them too. Because, I mean, they obviously see it every day the waste, but it's not a school or PTA issue. It is government who says they have to give it back, and they have to give it, and I tried rescuing some of the food. I wasn't allowed to think about cafeteria again, because it's an FDA guideline. It wasn't a school policy. It was, because I thought, okay, kids are gonna get hungry later. They're gonna want this. So I tried seeking it out, and that's the only way I was successful.
Okay, I'm gonna date myself here a bit, but whatever happened to buying home and, putting the label of food on a plate instead of everything being individually packaged?
Not entitled one.
it's not, they'll put the fruit, you have the trees and the whole food there is that, but that's child will not touch it. At our school, they put all the stuff in those plastic bowls, and then they put the bowl onto the divided tray.
Yeah.
We know that kids are gonna not eat all their food at school, right?
But it was already sectioned out, they were gonna put it
Yeah, the packaging and the containers and all that just seems like
I think
that's.
what you said, Jenny, is probably what you can do on a local level is talk to the PTA about, okay, these are the guidelines that the government set, but how can we work with these guidelines? Like, instead of taking it out on our own, get a program in the school and say, hey, let's have these kids separate out what they eat, what they don't eat, and work on, in bulk giving it to a food bank or in bulk compost. Like, I mean, you could talk to your PTA about that, and I'm sure at each individual school, organize a way to work within the guidelines to make the best of it without, without putting by the wayside the balanced diet that we're trying to promote.
They still been offered.
Right.
But that's an interesting conversation. If you have certain schools represented here, what if that's one of the tasks is to find out what are the possibilities? Because if one school is saying, well, FDA doesn't allow us to do that, but then some school over here in the same district says, well, this is what we're doing instead, then we're empowered and when we go back to small schools, so such and such is doing da. Can we do whatever the intervention is? And just see, because, if they're given the mandate. And the other difference may be that it's a Title I school versus a non-Title I, because then those are also very different guidelines.
Well, all of them are making me think too about the importance of educating children as you do this. Because they are the decision makers in tomorrow. If they think, if they learn that this many people could be fed with, what you're throwing away, they're starting to learn climate issues.
Have y'all thought about sort of having here at our church, how the old fashioned sensible almost check, your personal life. Have you thought for our Sunday school classes, maybe having a sort of check of who's practicing a testimony time or who did this, or so that it's a school, obviously, it's a church-wide initiative that we do every Sunday, and just say, how did you, somebody want to share out, or how did you talk to the school, or how did you talk to the work, or whatever? I'm just wondering, because it's kind of like a support group, you're more likely to do it because you're the group that does that.
And I can promise
So
you,
just a,
if we can find out, I'll guarantee you there are schools in this United States that have solved this problem.
Right.
We just need to find out how to do it.
well, but not just that how is our church, how did, but there are testimonies of this is what we're doing now. Like, because of this class, I'm paying more attention to it. I'm in the process of challenging a practice, an annual event of releasing helium balloons in memory of, and it's a great idea, but then, I started paying attention to, well, what happens to that balloon?
Yeah,
It's damaging the environment, and I already got no, this is our practice. No. So I'm praying how to, so that the group is saying, hey, this is what we're doing, we're stewards. So
We don't want to
and so
change.
it'd just be helpful even to think about it. We don't pray with me as I talk to them about, what this practice, it's a great idea, but this is what it's doing.
Yeah, aren't there other ways to
celebrate
memorialize
and
and
have fun.
celebrate something's life?
That makes me very
Yeah. Any of these things that, as a group, that we wanted to take on, if maybe we send letters or speak to them, or whatever we do, this many people can make a difference.
Well, what if we didn't show up at the school district? Where this is our district? What if Woodland as a church said, we're seeing all this waste, we want to study it, whatever. Again, those are things that we, just a thought, for y'all to decide.
Okay, we're past time, but please consider this week. All of these will be on the website, so all these lists will be on the website, and you may find others. But please, this week, pray about it, decide, starting, this week if you want, and when you're ready. What is it you're going to give to God this year that will help protect God's world?
All right, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.